Hello, my name is Sean Ennis from Ennis Management, and thank you for joining me here once again on the Creative Collective. And today I'm honored to be joined by a very special guest. He is a singer and songwriter from Ontario, Canada, Ed Roman.
Hey Sean, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so kindly for the opportunity to be on the show and express my ideas about my crafts and passion.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to have you. So the first thing I want to ask you is, you were originally from Ontario, Canada, but now reside in New York.
Well, I'm working and living in New York for the month of May, and then I'm back to Canada for 2 weeks, and then I'm off to China at the end of June for a couple of weeks to play again, another stint of playing and meeting people. After that, I'm off to Scotland in August, and then the UK in September, October. So I'm taking the music and everything that I'm doing out to the world on foot.
Wow, that is amazing. So let me try to keep up. So you're originally from Ontario. You're currently working and playing in New York.
That's correct. TV, radio appearances, the release of the video, which is the title track of my latest album, Red Omen, and it is an anagram of my own name. I was labeled a dyslexic as a kid and struggled immensely academically in school, and still to this day have issues with reading. It becomes something that means you have to work twice or three times as hard in order to achieve, a C plus or B average. But I always excelled in the arts because it doesn't have the same sort of rigid framework of, absorb and regurgitate. This is something that, for me, music was the vehicle to help me break out of that sort of difficulty that I was having. And I'm still, like I said, to this day, struggle with reading and writing. If you were asking me to pull out a book and start reading, I'd be stumbling and tripping. And the pronunciation factors of certain things. I should explain to the listening audience kind of what dyslexia is, because there's a lot of, what is this? I've heard about it for a long time. I'm sort of unsure what it is. It's sort of a pictorial, I should say, and spatial comprehension thing that we are gifted with. And I'm going to use the word gifted because it's been in the last couple of years that I've learned that dyslexia is actually a gift. It's not something that is an issue or a problem. And labeling and stigmatizing people with those things is one of the most unhealthiest things you can do, because it's tied into self-esteem and so many other negative, detrimental things that can really weigh and oppress a young person. So when I heard of people like Henry Winkler or people from the Dyslexia Society, or even as of late, Little Steven from the Bruce Springsteen projects, they're all out there trying to describe how important it is to have tactical and practical art connections in the academic world. And for me, that's why I gravitated towards music. It gave me that sense of freedom and being able to open up and express myself with all the other issues that are attached to it. So pictorial and spatial comprehension means if I said the word to you, or the phrase to you, the elephant walked down the street, immediately a dyslexic mind has to gravitate to the biggest word, which for the sheer sake of we're going to have trouble pronouncing it and understanding what it means. When we understand what it means, our minds start thinking in a three-dimensional fashion. In other words, what does that elephant look like? How big is it? Where is it standing? All of this stuff starts to come into play, and you're sort of thinking outside of the box in terms of what the sentence is actually saying. So the rest of it sort of comes into play, which means that I have to navigate through that sentence a couple of times in order for me to tell you the elephant is walking down the street. Now, here's the crazy thing about it. I will never forget what that sentence said or how it was said. As a result of the kind of learning disability, and I hate using that word we have, we develop a photographic memory. And a lot of times people will say to me, Ed, how do you remember that? It's my hindrance is my help. it's through the sheer repetitiousness of doing certain things that you just go, I'm never going to forget this. It's been a help to me in the music world because it's given me a wide variety of abilities to be able to interact, communicate musically, remember a lot of music, lyrics, as I'm a lyricist and a writer. That's a huge thing for me, and people are always staggered as to how many lyrics I know, words I know, immense vocabulary. Usually people say it doesn't seem like you have an issue. Well, give me a book and I'll show you how difficult it still is for me. So, again, the thing that I was labeled as, it was very difficult for me. I had to go to summer school. My mom, God bless her, in the 1970s, when they didn't understand what it was like, well, your son has a problem. He's hyperactive. He doesn't know how to comprehend. And my mom told people they were full of it. He loves learning. He's excited to learn. And you're not going to put him on medication just because he's excited. She spent hours of her time, along with my sister, who also struggled with dyslexia, night after night, practicing reading, helping us with our homework, developing word power, which she would call word safaris. So, like, if we figured out the word, we'd go into depth as to what the word meant, where it came from. This is what also helped me as a linguist and understand more about language and how to wield it in a creative way. So that's why I'm always saying, I'm a proponent of dyslexia is not an issue. It's actually a gift. It's the rigid framework of society that dictates that it's a problem, that you have a problem. But it's not that at all. And it took, as I said, Sean, a long time to accept the fact that it is that. It is a gift in that way. And want people to listen to in terms of talking about it. Like I mentioned, Henry Winkler, he's out there, in the forefront saying, I know this is a gift. I wish that people hadn't told me I had a learning disability. And it's alarming, I guess, and interesting to note that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that struggle all over the world. I should say millions. In fact, 90% of the populace is probably dyslexic in some kind of a way. A couple interesting things. One, there's a direct parallel to the amount of people that are leaving the education system as there are entering the prison systems. Now, that to me says something about the issues with academics and the framework of it and how it needs to be changed in order to make it more tactical and practical for the average person. And I've seen, I did an interview with a professor and head of special education at the University of Toronto who told me a lot of this stuff about, what is going on with the framework of education and how it needs to be changed. The human body, mind, spirit, soul is always going through an evolutionary period. Education and its sort of ideas hasn't in a number of years. In fact, what's ironic about it is that education grew and developed as a result of people's needs and necessities. And to arrest that idea now, when there are things that can be integrated on a very simplistic level, can actually accelerate and help other people that are dealing with academic issues. So I see it as a very interesting moment in time in order to bring up a dialogue to discuss these different kinds of things with people. And art is definitely something that is missing from the education system. Where I'm from in Canada, I taught at the conservatory and a multitude of other schools as well as privately for over 24 years. And over that time frame, I was alarmed to watch music programs, art programs, if not diminished, but completely removed from basic public and education. And what it does is it's massaging another part of your mind. It also is teaching critical thinking. And you're using those things, not just in the art form itself, but it applies itself to so many different things that we do on a daily basis. I was, kid people and go, hey, what I did first thing when I had coffee this morning? I was working on some calculus equations. And I mean, for some people maybe that are mathematically inclined and they're using it that way, and that's okay, but I think, again, there's that tactical, practical thing that's missing from education, and it needs to be integrated and used and massaged back into its place. I see as a direct result how even parents that come to me with troubled kids, and I worked as a music therapist in an institute with just that exact same sort of method, the difference in the day-to-day lives of those kids that had contact with music and any kind of art form for that matter, because it allows you to be you and express yourself in a way that other academics don't.
Wow, we got a lot to unpack there, but man, that was great. So let me go back for a second. The way that you described dyslexia was so vivid, and it gave me such a clear picture in my mind. Can you talk a little bit about that again? I just found it fascinating.
Yeah, like so, the average mind is expected in the schooling systems to read a page, a paragraph, a book, absorb certain material in order to, as I said, regurgitate it for the mark. What did you glean from this? What did you learn from this? And you either, have the high mark or you have the lower mark, depending on either how hard you worked in some cases or how hard you struggled. And for me, as I was saying, pictorial and spatial comprehension. It's one thing to get the answer right, but how is it that we're actually using that answer to our own advantage later in our lives? And dyslexia, because it has this sort of attachment to photographic memory and thinking three-dimensionally. Text is two-dimensional. It is on a page, you're seeing words, it is not leaping from the page. It is supposed to leap from the page in your imagination in some sort of a way. The theatrical aspect of how the story is unfolding in your mind. That's what intrigues the reader. But if a dyslexic is reading it and they're struggling with every word that they read, absorption takes so long. As a consequence, we think outside of the box to try to create a different kind of picture for what that represents. And as a result, on those other avenues of thinking, we see a higher potential in what that information represents. So that's why I say it's three-dimensional. It doesn't have that same connection to just the flat aspect to academics. And so often, then I have conversations with people, and they're like, as I said, how do you remember that? Well, it's through that three-dimensional thinking that I can still remember everything that's going on inside of the dissection of a cat in biology class in grade 11, when most people are like, I don't remember any of that stuff, man. And maybe I take it for granted some days that I think that way. But as I said, it's through my own problem that I've been sort of trained to think that way in order to try to maintain an average that keeps me up to speed without failing. I've been so close to almost losing courses or something to that effect just because I can't keep up with the speed and the ratio of what's going on. Meanwhile, I can write 100 songs in a month, and most people, they're like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And for me, it's tied into that same artistic sense of thinking about stuff. When I'm writing a song, I'm in another world thinking about the bigger part of the picture and the idea. So dyslexia has helped me think about the fantasy part of what life is about and how deep it can actually go. And as a consequence, many dyslexics that are artistically inclined usually have a lot of depth to their writing that is not always easily understood by the average person. A lot of art and music, and let's say lyrics in this context, are very flat and black and white. They don't have that sense of 4 or 5 layers of thinking that allows the listener to make it theirs. I don't want to say anything so literal that it's written right out there on the street. I want you to be thinking about what this subtle idea or metaphor means to you. And that's, I guess, where I was getting at spatial pictorial again. What does it mean to you? What are you thinking in that space? What are the pictures that are coming into your mind? How is it making you feel? Articulate it to yourself. All of that is a big part of the dyslexic sort of way of thinking behind stuff. If that helps in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating and really incredible. So another thing that really kind of moved me, the fact that you've taken dyslexia and you now refer to it as a gift.
That's right. I mean, here's the thing. I find the labeling of certain things on, especially a young mind, and for the adult mind for that matter, very detrimental. I don't think that we should all be put into boxes and say, well, you're this kind of a writer, or this kind of a person, or this kind of a thing. We all have incredible potentials to do a multitude of different kinds of things. And when you do that, it creates a self-esteem issue. So talking about it like it is a gift, and here's the thing, I used to teach autistic kids, and I hope I get a chance to do that again one day, because for two reasons. One, it's challenging, and I like the challenge. And two, they are some of the most intellectual people I've ever met in my life. And they are, may have issues with social issues, like, why are you so fat, sir, or whatever it might be. But ultimately, there's so much more going on in there, and I think labeling creates the boundary. It creates the fence that isn't open. There isn't that gate unless it's opened by the person or somebody that makes them realize that they have those kinds of potentials. Parents would come in and say, so-and-so is autistic, just so you know. There's all these different kinds of issues. They're already framing something for me as a teacher that I'll probably figure out on my own, but I need to understand that person's experience, because it behooves me as a teacher not to treat everybody the same way inside of the same framework. Everybody learns differently at a different speed, and who am I to say, well, no, it's this, that, and the other thing. That's where real learning, even for the teacher, comes into play. Because I've learned an incredible amount of things from my students, even being a teacher myself over the last 24 years. If there isn't that give and take inside of the exchange, as I said, I don't think real learning or comprehension is happening. So that's what I get excited about.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how you've been able to use your gift to your advantage when it comes to your music career?
Well, yeah, because I'm always thinking outside of the box. It's made a lot of people go, what the heck is that? What is that all about? It opens up the most interesting dialogue with people that I wouldn't expect it ever to. And reaching out through those same kinds of things has connected me with an incredible amount of people and circumstances and situations. As I mentioned, the title track of my latest record is Red Omen. It's an anagram of my own name, and that's a typical thing that a dyslexic would do, is try to flip and play with words on a regular basis to see a new potential in what those words could represent. So that's been a great help to me in terms of who I am as a dyslexic and how I function. And then again, like I said, reaching out to the Davis Dyslexia Society here in the U.S. and Whole Dyslexia in Canada, it's become a bigger than me now situation, which makes me feel alive and really human and connected to my living experience, because it's now the figurehead for corporate and public fundraising, for facilitating programs, for tutoring for kids that struggle with it, that can't afford to have the same kinds of lovely experiences that I had, and fortunate experiences I had with my mom, who cared enough to spend that time with me. There was no method back in the 1970s when I was diagnosed. Your son has an incredibly high IQ, but he's just not, fast enough. He doesn't have the whatever it takes to fit into this sort of academic framework. And my mom, God bless her, she was like, you're full of it. You have no idea what's going on here. And that this is where I'm using this dyslexia to change perception, to change dialogue, to open dialogue with people. And I'm surprised, my friend, as to how many people that say, I had those experiences in school. I struggled immensely because of this. I didn't know what it was. I was labeled this. I was labeled that. So to me, I'm wielding the negative into the positive, and I can't see anything more vindicating than that.
Now, who is Henry Winkler?
You remember the Fonz from Happy Days?
Yes, I do.
That's Henry Winkler.
Okay.
And he is out there, as I said, like a lot of people, talking about this and what it means to be labeled with a learning disability, and that, trying to point out to people that you have incredible potential. Just because it doesn't fit into, as I said, that sort of academic framework of things, doesn't mean that you're stupid, doesn't mean that you're not creative, doesn't mean that you don't have potential. So when I heard him speaking about these kinds of things, I was like, dude, you're up. I get it. I feel what you're feeling, and now I'm embracing these ideas. And not only that, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of actors and musicians that have, over hundreds of years, have struggled with it. Mozart, classic dyslexic. Beethoven, classic dyslexic. The Bach himself, with the canons, two different pieces of music running backwards on one another so that they create a different type of counterpoint and harmony. In modern day times, anybody from Goldie Hawn, Jennifer Aniston, Keanu Reeves, they're all struggling with dyslexia and are out there talking about it and what it means to be a dyslexic and what it's like to have to navigate what they do. And they think, well, how could that be? I mean, they're actors, they're memorizing scripts, yeah, but it's difficult for them. But once they've got it, that's why they're committed to the character. That's why they're committed to the role. It becomes a part of them, and the art form becomes a part of them.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea that so many truly accomplished and talented people, had this gift and were living and thriving, and I'm sure struggling at the same time with this as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, let's talk about, I think you mentioned that you have a 24-year teaching career. So let me ask you, what initially made you want to go into teaching, and then can you also talk about some of your experiences?
Sure. Well, to be quite honest, I needed the bread. And I don't know too many musicians that I've talked to that haven't been in a teaching experience in some way, shape, or form. But at a very young age, I was lucky enough to have a few teachers that pointed me in the right direction and said, Ed, you're really good at talking to people and working with people, and you would be a natural at teaching. And I took it on myself to dabble into it, and then before I knew it, I was more than just dabbling. I was part of a school or something like that, and using my skills and my trade to help other kids learn and understand. And so, and that's the thing. I've had, a very fruitful 24 years, and I've been on a hiatus for the last 6 because I've been working with a management company in the U.S. and now booking agent company in the U.S. A lot of amazing experiences working with different people from young to old. And as I said before, a lot of my students, I'm always learning from them in some way, shape, or form. And again, the teaching experience has always allowed me to learn and grow. I was working at a school in the city of Toronto, and I was teaching bass and full-time, and one of the teachers and the head of the school came in and said, can you teach guitar? Well, I play guitar, but can you teach it? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, okay, you have 5 students this week. And I'm like, okay. And through that process of working at the school, I taught myself how to read guitar music by taking other people through that process. So I've always found teaching not as just something of imparting information, but it also becomes a learning experience for me. And as a consequence, I can then navigate more of what that student needs, or students or student body need. That's the thing about, paying attention to your living art world, even if it means you're teaching it. There's always a change, there's always some growth and fluctuation that we need to pay attention to. And it's kept me healthy and strong in terms of my mind and how I think about the art world as a result. And as I said before, working with autistic kids has been some of the most interesting experiences I've ever had, because although they're labeled with problems, as I said, they are some of the most intellectual people that I've been lucky enough to speak with. I mean, even 8 and 10-year-olds have a lot more going on that are autistic than some 50-year-olds that I've spoken to. So again, I don't really always see those things as problems, and I see them as helps instead of hindrances. So to answer your question about what are those amazing experiences, they've all been amazing. Let every person be my mentor so I may learn from them. That's my moniker.
Well, very well said. And I want to go back to a stat that you mentioned earlier on about the number of people leaving the school system and entering the prison system. I want, if you could restate that, and then also let me get your take on what can be done to sort of fix or help the school system.
Well, I think what the most important thing to do is open a dialogue with ministers of education to integrate more of these basic pictorial and spatial comprehensive ideas inside of learning. And why that really ties into your first question about the direct amount of parallel between people entering the prison system and leaving the school systems. That statistic has been growing and increasing for almost 50 to 60 years. And it's at a staggering and an alarming rate, which means education and the framework of education is failing the 21st century's mind experience. It needs to grow and change, become more tactical in terms of how do we practically use this information as opposed to just regurgitating it? What is its validity? How does it fit inside of what we need to and how we need to use it? So often people are like, well, it's irrelevant. Why am I even learning this? I don't need to learn this. I don't even want to learn this. That's saying that the average mind is going through change in terms of how it wants to learn and what it wants to learn. So when you see those parallels, and here's the other thing, and I know some people are like, well, IQ tests don't mean anything, but at the same time, there's an incredible amount of intelligent criminals. The criminal mind is not necessarily something that's stupid on a regular basis, and that means that their mind is thinking in a different way. So what fails them is that they don't have that mechanism of being able to be pushed or into the right areas of their lives. Consequently, it falls by the wayside. Teen pregnancies, drug abuse, whatever it might be, is a direct result of the mind trying to circumnavigate these incredibly difficult times that we live in, and not being able to have it function in their daily lives means that they feel like they're failures, that they can't get involved in the way that they're expected to, and boom, you end up with that statistic. And it's alarming to understand actually what that is and what that represents. And again, education is saying, well, that's because they have a problem. Usually what I've found out through cognitive and psychotherapy and things that I've done with people in the past, that when you start blaming other people for the issue, you're the one that actually has the problem. And education is always saying that. Well, no, they're the ones with the problem. They're delinquent. No, they can't fit into the framework. Well, I beg to differ.
Now, can you talk about the organization or organizations that you're working with in terms of was it fundraising?
Yes, it's the whole Dyslexia Society. It's going to be a corporate fundraising program. My goal is to raise either between $250,000 or $500,000 in the next couple of years for tutoring programs. But that's just a band-aid effect. What I really want to do is sit down with ministers of education and have critical discussion about what this represents, and have people from the Dyslexia Society representing, so that we can have that dialogue to discuss how we can change this. The Davis method is in 56 nations around the world, and being, as I said, integrated and paid for, which means it's not coming out of pocket. Public education is paying for it. It's part of the system now, but not in the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere is where it was created, but it's not embraced. So that means every child or person that is going through those programs has to pay for it out of pocket. It's not subsidized or anything like that. So that's why I say the money is one thing, it's the Band-Aid effect, but not having it integrated into education is ludicrous. So that's a big part of the organization that I'm working with today.
All right, excellent, and that's truly a truly great cause.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So let's talk about the Red Omen album.
Sure. What do you want to know?
Well, just give me some backstory and the process and kind of what went on in creating the project.
Well, I'm always writing. I'm never going to stop until they put me in the ground and I'm pushing up daisies. But the funny thing about the albums that I create, not so funny, is that when you're coming up with ideas for songs, that's one thing, and the important thing is that you're continually writing. But you never know where those envelopes want to lend themselves to a grouping of songs. But as you start writing, you start seeing certain parallels in language or philosophical ideas or concepts that are relative to each other, and they feel like they belong with one another in an album or a grouping. So Red Omen and the album Red Omen is definitely an emotional, socio-political kind of look at the 21st century and how we're relating to one another. And I was lucky enough to, and I'm still working with one of Canada's finest producers and engineers, Michael Jack. He's worked with everybody from Rush, Bono from U2, Hilary Duff. His list of people, it goes deep. Oscar Peterson, I could keep going and going and going. We met many years ago when I was a young man, and I've been working with Michael ever since. So the projects that we work on and forge are special projects to the both of us. Again, we try to not have the method of this is the method. Mike will come in, what are we working on today, Ed? Well, I've got this idea, and let's start to see it through. I may have the lyrical content, chord structure, arrangement, whatever it might be, already set in my mind, and I'm developing it. But again, we try not to allow there to be, okay, no, it's got to be bass, drums, guitar, keyboards, we're going to cut it like this. We don't know. And that's what makes that journey really, really exciting and ongoing. Red Omen has been that. It was that, and the album I did before that, Letters from High Latitudes, same thing, same process of non-process. The album before that, which was a double album, Oracles and Ice Cream, same thing again. And it's a menagerie of everything. Gypsy jazz, funk, rock, R&B, soul, spoken word, country music. And I like having that wide variety of material inside of what I'm doing. And as a consequence, I reach out to a far wider spectrum of people without just being labeled or even, put into a box by saying he's just a this artist, he's just a that artist. I just want to be an artist. Charles Mingus, when he would go to Europe, he would say, they don't call me an American jazz musician or jazz musician, they call me an American artist. I mean, Mingus was one of the finest composers, jazz composers, if not, of the 20th century. But being labeled, and a lot of artists that I've heard talk about this, is a really unhealthy thing. It creates prejudices inside of music, and in the art world, having prejudice is not a good idea. It's not healthy, and it's not right in my mind. So Red Omen is not that much different from what I normally do. It's a wide variety of material that's offering the listeners a wide variety of things to pay attention to and feel and participate in. And again, I'm not going to stop. Somebody said, well, give me a funk album. All right, give me $250 million. I'll give you a full funk album. I don't write that way. If you want me to do something specifically because the way you want me to do it, you're going to pay out of the rear end. That's not the way I work. So to me, art is, again, that experience that's defining who we are in this moment in time. Why should you be putting an equation on it? It never has an equation from day to day. You don't know what's going to happen from day to day. You could step off the sidewalk and get hit by a truck, even though you thought you were going to buy an ice cream cone. So to me, that's stupid and ludicrous to even think that way, to say just be one way. That's a marketing tactic, and I think it's unhealthy.
Now talk to me about the music video.
Red Omen, it's a full animated short of the entire song. I got to work with Nelson Diaz, who's one of New York's finest animators. If you've seen SpongeBob SquarePants, Kung Fu Panda 2, Ted, many things on Sesame Street, Nickelodeon, that's all Nelson's work. I, for 2 years, searched and looked for different people to help me with the animation project, and not just so that it was like, we want your money. We like the song, we like the material. And Nelson was a shot in the dark. I found a thing that he had created just because he wanted to create a GIF. And it was of a Easter Island moai head, if you know those big, huge stone heads that you see on Easter Island. And the heads around the world, the little symbol that we use is the moai. And I started to follow the trail to find out who he was. Sent him a couple emails. He said, "Well, let me check it out." And I sent it to him. And he fell in love with the tune. And there was some interesting connectiveness where he was like, there's a lyric in the song about going to Machu Picchu with Jimi Hendrix to a UFO base camp. And he was like, I just took my family for a vacation to like Machu Picchu like just months ago. And so that's weird that you have that lyric in it. He found that really interesting and connected for him. And at the same time, he was sending out his portfolio to different higher-end record companies and producers about wanting to work with certain artists to create animations for film, for videos, and he just didn't have any response. So when I came out of the woodwork, he was like, yeah, I love this. I really want to be involved in this. And we've created a wonderful little 4.5-minute short that, as I mentioned, is showing at festivals all over the world. Irony would have it that it's actually showing here in New York the same month that I'm working and playing here in the city. So, you know, there's a lot of really neat connections between me and him and how it actually evolved. So I see that again as part of that bigger part of the art experience of following a method of non-method and throwing what you can at the wall to see what sticks. Again, he likes the music, so that was a big deal for me. It wasn't just like we're trying to get a gig and get it done.
And you've also received some accolades or awards?
Absolutely, yeah. Multitude of awards and accolades all over the United States from a multitude of guilds, writing guilds. I was up for 7 pre-Grammy nominations on the last record that I did, 4 pre-Grammy nominations on the most recent album. For me, I'm appreciative of all of them and the awards that I've won, but it's most important for me to keep working and to keep writing. Life is short, and every day is a gift. I'm appreciative of those things, but what's most important to me is connecting to people and creating.
Now, what advice would you give for a musician just starting out in their career?
Well, we all define ourselves and put ourselves up against the things that are, you know, most interesting to us. We're all defined by our influences, and at the same time, those influences, as we put ourselves up against them, can be our very hindrance. You know, we've already had certain artists. Trying to imitate them isn't, I don't think, a bad thing, but trying to be them through your process isn't a good thing. That means that it's hardest to be yourself, and at the same time, the easiest to be yourself. The important thing is being acceptant of those things and your growth, how you're continually growing through the process. The young artist, be yourself. Talk about what you want. Be passionate about what you want to talk about. And keep moving forward. Keep creating, because every time you create, you grow. You learn more about the experience every time that you go through it.
That's some great advice. Now, can you share your social media links?
Absolutely, Sean. It's edroman.net is my website. All my network links are there, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You'll always find me on any of those locations under Special Ed Roman, whether it's my band page or my Twitter account, my YouTube channel. But I like to, have people navigate to the website to see what I'm doing, the shows that I'm doing, what I'm working on. But come on by, send me a message. I love talking to people. That's part of what is my MO, connecting with people.
Is there anyone you'd like to acknowledge for offering you financial or emotional support throughout your music career?
My mom, definitely, because those moments coming home from school, crying, and being really upset about being called stupid and being told I would never amount to anything, and you're a failure. My mom is the one who helped me keep my chin up. She is definitely my angel. And then I would say most recently in the last 6 years, Michael Stover at MTS Management, again, believes in me, believes in the music that I'm writing, and he's been an incredible help to me getting the music all over the world. So I owe him an incredible amount of gratitude, and I'm proud to call him a friend and a colleague.
Is there anything else you'd like to promote or share?
I'd like to say thank you, Sean, for giving me the opportunity to express and talk about what I'm doing. It means so much to me to connect with people and talk about what I'm doing, more so than just like, I'm playing here, I'm gigging here, whatever it might be. I am playing for another couple of nights in New York City. I'm at Pianos tonight off of Ludlow in New York City, Manhattan. Tomorrow night, between 7 and 9 p.m., open to the public. It's kid-friendly. At the School of Visual Arts here at Chelsea in Manhattan. If anybody is in Manhattan, they want to come out, listen to what a songwriting experience of animation, the art of creation is all about. We're going to be talking about that for a couple of hours. On Friday, I'm down at the Caffeine Underground in Brooklyn. It's my last show in New York City. I'm off for a week, just visiting and hanging out with some friends here. Then I'm back to Canada again. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be on the show and talk about what I do.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate it.
As always, I'd like for you to write your comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. And for all of your promotion, marketing, as well as music career consulting needs, email ennisproductions@gmail.com.